on today's Story Beat.
Same with Stephen Sondheim. When he came to see us, I was so excited because I wanted him to see what we were doing. But then when he was actually there, it was terrifying because we take all the songs out of their context. And, he's very, very particular about the harmonics of his music. And John Weber has just totally reinvented it. And when we came up to him after the show, he said to John, I loved the changes. I wish there were more.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Jeff Harnar, is an award-winning cabaret, concert, and recording artist. His Carnegie Hall appearances include both the Cole Porter and Noel Coward Centennial Galas. Jeff's televised PBS concerts include the 1959 Broadway Songbook with music director Alex Rybeck, as well as American Songbook, Stephen Sondheim, co-starring KT Sullivan, and Michael Feinstein's Live at New Jersey Performing Arts Center. Jeff also toured with Broadway's Shauna Hicks in their Symphony Pops concert, I Got Rhythm, Mickey and Judy's Hollywood. For his exceptional live performances and for directing shows of other outstanding performers, Jeff has won multiple MAC, Bistro, and BroadwayWorld Cabaret Awards and the Noel Coward Foundation Cabaret Award. He's released 4 solo albums, including Dancing in the Dark, and most recently, I Know Things Now, My Life in Sondheim's Words. Jeff can also be seen performing in the movie Joshua Tree 1951, A Portrait of James Dean. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a real joy for me to welcome the brilliant singer, Jeff Harnar, to StoryBeat today. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi, Steve. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're joining me today. So let's go back in history a little bit. At what age were you when the music and singing bug first bit you?
Wow. Very, very, very young. I was one of those children that responded to a record player, as a toddler. So a record player was my favorite toy. The magic of music, it was a blissful place for me. But as far as this kind of music that I like, which is primarily theater music or the Great American Popular Songbook standards from the last century, that began when I was 5 or 6. We had a neighbor who was in a community theater production of How to Succeed in Business and had the great smarts to sit me down in front of the hi-fi to listen to the cast album before I went to the show that night. And of course, the music, the vibrancy of that cast album which is one of my all-time favorites. But that cast album and that experience, and then seeing people I knew on stage, that just became something I played over and over. I had the same experience with Finian's Rainbow. Was an album I listened to over and over, and then we saw a college production of it. And so cast albums were my music of choice.
Were you still a little boy, like 5, 6, 7 years old?
Yes.
So then when did you know you had some kind of special vocal ability?
At the age of 9, my family moved around the country a lot, and those experiences listening to that music happened while we were living in Michigan. And then we moved to Connecticut, so my dad could work at the World's Fair in the Lincoln Mercury division. So that brought me to New York at the age of very young, 6 or 7. And when we moved away, I was 9. And by then my parents knew I loved Broadway music. So they said, your going away present when we move is to go see a Broadway show. So I went to the library and listened to every cast album of every show and got it down to between Steve and Edie and Golden Rainbow or The Happy Time with Kander and Ebb's score. So I chose The Happy Time, and it just transformed me because there were children my age in it. And I love that score. Still, that's a favorite cast album. So when we moved to Chicago, and my mom saw that they were doing The Music Man in our community. And so she got that record. I saw there was a part for a little boy. I went and auditioned. I got that part. It was the first clue I had that I might have talent to actually do what I was listening to on the records. And then from that production, I got an agent. There was one of the big casting agencies in Chicago is the Shirley Hamilton Agency, and Shirley Hamilton lived in our community and came to that show and started auditioning me. So by the age of 10, I had I had my SAG and AFTRA cards.
Wow.
And so I was a jingle singer as a voice soprano.
Were you? I got to guess you were singing Gary, Indiana.
Yes, I sang Gary, Indiana with the lisp.
With the lisp.
Yeah.
And so you were really a kid. You weren't, you weren't even a teenager. You were a kid.
No, I was age appropriate for that part. I was just, when they just did it in New York, I was in the rehearsal hall and I could hear the boy practicing for it. And it just brought back so many memories to hear a young, and that boy was brilliant. I forget his name. I just saw him as Oliver.
Oliver. I can't remember his name either, but he is apparently quite amazing.
He's extraordinary. And of course, that was one of my next shows, was being the Artful Dodger and Oliver. So to get to see this kid and Oliver was, but I understand the magic of finding a place that young.
So do you think of music as a calling?
I have heard other people use that word and I think, well, that's highfalutin, but you know what? I can't think of anything else I would rather do. It's what motivates me to get up and move forward. And this, now that I've added this element of directing to my work, it actually makes me feel useful in a field that I love. So,
Who were your early influences, aside from shows, which you've said, but what singers were influential to you?
Well, because so many. I mean, every cast album I've just named, I could go back to Robert Morris, Bonnie Scott, and then Finian's Rainbow. Ella Logan was just, these voices that had so much vibrancy to them. I mean, they just are a whole orchestra in the timbre of their voice. And of course, in The Music Man, it was Barbara Cook. So the interesting thing about Barbara Cook being an early voice that spoke to me, sung to me, is that she's the one who, by the time I was in high school, she had metamorphosized into a cabaret singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first time that I ever was aware that a Broadway person could actually create a 1 hour piece of entertainment where they're the whole show. And if they do it right, which she and Wally Harper did, it can be a whole rainbow of emotional experiences, which that's what a Broadway show is. So that she was maybe one of the most significant voices because of how she drew me into the world, the awareness of cabaret.
You have a powerful voice, and that power of voice is what makes some Broadway stars huge, because they're able to sing pure notes at high power.
Well, you're being very kind. I'm looking, at the Jekyll and Hyde memorabilia behind you. I do not have that kind of power voice. I don't. I think I am so grateful for my voice. I think it's, what I love about cabaret singing is that the microphone is like the ear of the listener. And that's really the level that I'm communicating on. I don't have one of those. And that's why I don't think I ever got very far with Broadway auditioning. Mm-hmm. It's really just not that size of an instrument.
So where did you train? How did you train your voice? You're a young man, you're a young kid. Where did you go to learn more about how to sing?
So I went to this incredible high school in the Chicago suburbs called New Trier. It's where Anne Margaret, Rock Hudson, Charlton Heston, Bruce Dern, Ralph Bellamy all went there. And more recently, people know the names Anne Hampton Callaway and Liz Callaway, who were my classmates. Anne was a year older, Liz was a year younger. It is an oh wow, because
so I've had on this show both Amanda McBroom and Michelle Brauerman, who work with Anne Hampton Callaway regularly.
Yes, they do. I just saw them all together at 54 Below. Anne and Liz were stars at that time, and their mother was in the Chicago Symphony chorus. So we didn't think twice about going home after school to their house and singing. That just happened. And then New Trier High School still has an extraordinary performing arts. It's a 1,500 seat theater with a balcony, full fly space, and all their costumes came from New York. They were, at that time, it was called Brooks Van Horn. So we had the actual Broadway costumes for these productions. So I studied with a wonderful man, Toby Nicholson, who's still alive and vital in my life. I studied with an amazing mentor named Dr. William J. Peterman, who directed these productions. He directed Anne Margaret when she was in Plain and Fancy. And I studied with William Rush, who was in the Chicago Opera, Metropolitan Opera, but taught at our school. So I had great teachers, great nurturing right from the get-go.
You had really foundational training as a kid.
Yes. And I got it. I mean, I understood. When I was, in grade school, I would go to the New Trier productions and see them. They were as good as Broadway shows, to my young eyes. And I aspired to work into that system, which I did. By my senior year, Liz Calloway and I were doing Kismet together. She's now a Tony Award nominee. So is Anne Hampton Calloway. And in fact, both Liz and Anne recorded duets with me on my upcoming album of Cy Coleman music. So we've come full circle 45 years later to be singing together again.
Isn't that fun?
It's fun, and it's really extraordinary to me that I had so many talented friends and that we've all remained friends.
That's a really great thing when that happens. I have a number of those too, and it's very gratifying when you are tracking each other throughout a career. And you don't know about that when you're a young person. You don't know you're going to track that along with anybody else. But then it works out that way, and that really becomes a very nice part of your life. You knew when you were 9 or 10 that you could sing, obviously, because you went and did Music Man and you did more and you were already keenly interested in training. But was there a point where you said to yourself, you know what, I really am good at this and I really can make a career out of it? Did you have that sense?
You know what? My dad said it first, which was amazing because he was a businessman. But when he saw, first they all saw the joy of doing the Music Man when I was 9. But when I got these union cards and started working and had to file tax returns and whatever, my dad was like, wow, if this is what you want to do, we're going to support you 100%. As long as you can make a living at it, you should do it. It's what you love to do. I mean, he was amazing. My parents were amazing, and they were not stage parents, but my dad was in the chorus of Oliver, and he was the look what do you talk guy, and he had no sense of pitch, but in fact they told him not to sing in The King and I. They said please just don't sing, so that I could be young Lewis in that. But they would drive me to and from auditions. My dad, if I did something that was a night shoot, he would stay with me all night and drive me home. Got a speeding ticket one time, which I'm sure thrilled him, but he was still holding down, a 9-to-5 job in the city. I don't know how they did it, but they certainly enabled me in the most joyful way.
Similar to you, I had parents that didn't get in my way. They didn't necessarily do everything that your parents did, but it's really important, I think, for young performers especially, to have parents who are at least supportive in some way, because there are plenty of parents out there who will say, you don't want to go into that. You don't want to do show business. It's a very difficult business. It's very uncertain and insecure, but you had supportive parents. And I think that's probably very helpful to your life.
Yes. I'm very, very grateful every day. They are gone now, but they are alive and well in my heart.
All right, so let's talk about the work that you do. What kinds of songs are you attracted to? Now, I know it's already cabaret songs, it's show tunes, it's that kind of thing, but is there a specific type of song within that game that you really glom onto?
I start always with the lyric. It's just because I'm a cabaret singer and it literally is just you and the night and the music. There are no sets, no costume changes. The words, the lyrics are my text. I love story songs. I start with the lyric, and then the plus to that is that the lyric, I have to be a reliable, believable narrator of that lyric. So
sure.
The lyric has to fit me. But that's how I begin. In those cast albums, it's drawn right away to Frank Lesser and to Meredith Willson, and there were just so many. Cole Porter is one of my favorites. I won't name favorites. Interestingly, though, I've been doing Sondheim now, which I didn't touch till I was in my 50s, because I was terrified of it.
Terrified in what way? Why?
The sophistication of the lyrics seemed beyond my realm as a human on this planet, and the music, the difficulty of the music. I just could not get it off the stage and into me. And that was a wonderfully magical thing that happened for me in my 50s with KT Sullivan and working with director Sandra Lee. Sandra Lee, who used to dance into my living room as a child as Tiger Lily. Who would have thought that she's one of my directors? She's 93. And I mean, I knew her name when I was 5. It's crazy to me. But she and KT Sullivan and John Weber gave me the courage to realize I could take these lyrics and these songs. And John Weber, one of the great music directors I've worked with, he's a jazz virtuoso. And the idea of, plucking these songs and hearing them through his jazz vocabulary also gave me courage, because I knew I wasn't mimicking any Broadway performance, anything as anyone had ever heard it before. John helped me, tailor fit these songs to me.
So you're looking for songs that have story, imagery. You can actually see a mental picture when you're singing a song. Those are the kinds of songs that you're attracted to, yes?
Yes, that give some insight into how my heart and mind work, that give voice to as personal experience as I can possibly find, and thus, hopefully, it's universal. One of my quips is that I think there are only 4 kinds of songs in the world, and they're all love songs, and they fall into these categories. I want to be in love. I am in love. I was in love. And New York, New York. I mean, every song falls into that. And in a way, my shows tend to all follow that through line. The I want, I'm looking for, the yearning song, and then the being in love, and then whatever the heartbreak is. And then the New York, New York element means they're just going to be surprises. They're going to be novelty numbers and left turns.
So are you trying within your shows to tell a story over the course of the evening?
It's there always for me as a performer. There is always a trajectory happening, but sometimes it's not so overt. But I know that certain songs belong at the beginning of a show, and some that ideally in the shows that I put together, the songs should feel inevitable. And looking back at them, the song I sang in the 9th spot could not possibly come in the 2nd spot. And the song,
it is. There's a structure to writing a Broadway musical. There's a structure to writing a movie or a TV show, and there should be a structure to developing a cabaret act as well.
And that is why the 3 directors that I work with the most, Sarah Louise Lazarus, Sandra Lee, and Barry Kleinborg, are dramaturgs. They come from the world of the theater. That is what they're looking for too. Sandra always says, you have no scene to set up your song. So these transitions, the texture of each song just has to be so vivid that we all know immediately where you are. And Barry Kleinborg is so concerned with the arc, and Sarah is so concerned with the personalization, that each lyric be authentically my own. So, combining those calls to action, it's a wonderful thing.
Of all those songs that you've chosen, because you choose songs for specific reasons, obviously, what makes a good song good? Is it just the emotion in it? Is it the lyric? What is it that you finally see, oh, this song, I have to sing this song because of blank X, Y, or Z? What makes it good?
It's different for every song, different for every listener, different for every singer. One of the things that I heard as a life tool is to, before you speak, ask, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? So my version of that is on stage in a cabaret act. Does this song need to be sung? Need to be sung right now? Does it need to be sung by me? And the answer has to be yes to all 3 for each song. That's how significant they need to be for me. Otherwise, I can't ask people to give me audience for an hour if it's not. As as a writing a musical, what is the moment when it has to elevate into song? When is spoken word not enough? It's the magic of theater. So those moments, those explosions, those arias, when something just elevates, I look for those. And sometimes they're very quiet things.
Do you think about who your audience is while you're selecting songs?
I think about entertaining an audience. So I'm always aware that I want humor. I think you have to earn the right to sing ballads. So there in my shows, there's a preponderance toward novelty, humor, story songs before I feel like I've earned the right to, go down to a pin spot moment of something very personal.
So the audience is in your thoughts, but it has to do with how you're going to entertain them, how you're going to elevate their evening.
Yes. You're asking me to look at this maybe more more specifically than I ever really have. It's just when I take Cy Coleman, I'll say Cy Coleman right now because that's the one that we're recording. It's which of these songs sits right on me, and which do I think bring me joy or give voice to what I want to sing. And then once we have those, it's like, what's the storyline here? How much of this are we talking about Cy Coleman and his life, and how much of it are we talking about mine? Whether we're talking about it or not, but that's what's happening underneath. It's great fun for me.
I imagine that you actually discover things about the writers by doing what you're doing, by figuring out what these songs are and what they mean, that you're actually learning things about the writers as well.
I am. I'm also aware, the first theme show I did was a tribute to Betty Comden and Adolph Green, and they were alive at the time. And a friend of mine was a Broadway producer, and he made the suggestion, get their permission. And they did not give us their permission. Their first answer was, no, we want to shut that down, because they were still doing a party with Comden and Green. But they said, we'll entertain one phone call. So if you would like to speak to us, we'll listen. So I knew I had this one shot to pitch my idea. And the first thing I said is it won't be anything like a party with Comden and Green, because other than at the beginning saying Betty Comden, every word out of my mouth is by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, and saying that again at the end, there will be no, and then they wrote, and then they wrote, and this is from this. It will all be my story using your songs. And Adolph was like, well, what's an example? And I said, well, like for falling in love, I've put together I Met a Girl and Fireworks. And he's like, that's a great idea. And then I said, and then I said, we're going to call the show Carried Away, because I love your patter songs. So I want to do a big medley at the end. That's all your patter songs threaded using the song Carried Away as the refrain, all as examples. And for me, it's going to be my crazy New York energy. It's about me. It's not ever, playing the switchboard operator or the Peter Pan that flies or and they were like, wow, what? And they said, what are you doing Neverland? And I said, yes, but at that point in my act, which this is 1989, I used to do a shtick where I talked about my brothers. I only have one brother, but I said I had two brothers, and we used to sing a cappella doo-wop on the street corners of Detroit, which of course we never did. But then I tell the audience, my brothers are here tonight, and I want to bring them up, and of course they're invisible. And I did this because I had worked for Phyllis McGuire of the McGuire sisters, so I did this, and I sang sincerely with my invisible brothers. Well, for my Comden and Green show, I wanted to sing Neverland as a doo-wop song, and Adolph was like, I love that idea. So they were like, okay, send us the song list, and we'll take another look at it, and we'll give it and then ultimately they said, we want to see that show. So after they saw it, their first reaction again was negative. They when they first saw it, which was opening night, they said, we're just concerned because you've taken all of these songs out of their context, none of the original. And then they started going through it and saying, well, but we like how you did that. And then and you're doing it with the song Simplified Language. That's always our 11 o'clock comedy song, but you're doing it like third. But it actually works there. So, and then you've made Some Other Time so short, you've truncated it, but you've attached it to Distant Melody, which nobody hears. So okay, so don't leave that alone. And then they're like, you know what? Just do it the way you have it. And then we got this New York Times review, and they were like, you've got to keep doing this show forever. So, I'm very conscious that we're not all, same with Stephen Sondheim. When he came to see us, I was so excited because I wanted him to see what we were doing. But then when he was actually there, it was terrifying because we take all the songs out of their context. And, he's very, very particular about the harmonics of his music. And John Weber has just totally reinvented it. And when we came up to him after the show, he said to John, I loved the changes. I wish there were more. And, that to me, is like,
that's a win. That's a win.
That is really a win.
That's huge because he was very particular.
I think he mellowed. I really do think that my timing was right for, I think if I had met him in his 40s, it wouldn't have been that response. But he was in his 80s.
I'm always interested in artists who hang on to their stuff so tightly, like you're talking about Condon and Green, and like Sondheim, where they hang on to it so tightly they just won't let it go. And then when they see it somehow interpreted in a different way, their eyes open because they can't see it any other way in their own heads. And I think that that's a very interesting thing. You know, when I listen to you sing, I can tell that you really love what you're doing. It's not fake. You're not faking your way through it. What do you do to find that inspiration? How do you find that passion for the music? Is it just there naturally, or do you actually work at that?
The number one thing is going out and seeing other performers, or going and seeing Broadway shows, just going out and seeing things. I learn, I'm inspired, I'm uplifted, or as you probably know, an hour of a bad cabaret act is the longest hour on the planet. But you learn what I don't want to do. I don't want to make a choice like that. I mean, I learned very early from Sarah Louise Lazarus that I can have perfect pitch when I'm singing, but I can be absolutely tone deaf when I'm speaking to an audience. I mean, she's very careful about the way things are spoken. It is very easy to say something that sours the audience to you, inadvertently. So, anyway, I go and study everybody, and I was very lucky when I started doing cabaret. Margaret Whiting, Judy Wilson, Lane Stritch, Sylvia Sims. So many wonderful people were in their prime, what I think of as their prime, because they were older and they brought great wisdom and stagecraft to their work. So, Anne Francine, the list goes on and on of unforgettable. We just lost Rita Gardner, but her cabaret show, Try to Remember, is just, if you want to hear a great album, listen to that. She was extraordinary.
So the songs themselves, I assume, give you a certain amount of passion just because you love the songs.
They do. Absolutely, they do. I wouldn't be doing the songbook of somebody who, I have found, like, I did a lot of work that sustained me in New York City on cruise ships, where you go and you do your show with the band that's on board. And, I have kind of aged out of that because the audience now wants 70s music as their nostalgia. And I hit a ceiling with my own musical taste. I don't really want to learn some of the music that is more popular on ships right now. The common denominator songs have changed for, and that is a crowd where you absolutely have to be thinking about them, because a cruise ship audience doesn't buy a ticket to your show. So they're just there because you're the next buffet.
Oh, and you can't get out of town when you're on the cruise ship.
Oh, that experience
you're stuck
too.
On the ship.
Oh man, when being the wrong singer for the wrong crowd is the loneliest.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine. It's got to be very challenging to be in a place where you're stuck with the crowd that wasn't all that thrilled.
Yeah, I mean, there was one cruise line they put me on where the cruise director met me backstage before my show, and he said, "I don't know why they sent you here. You're not the right." I was about to go on. He was about to go out and do his shtick to introduce me. And he goes, "I have no idea why they sent you here. You're not. These are 3-day cruises. These are people, primarily Spanish speaking. These are people who, just. I really, if you would like to leave early, I will make it happen so that you get the full pay, but you don't have to stay for this." I was doing 2 cruises back to back. And I was like, well, okay, we can talk about that. I had a good rehearsal with the band. I thought the band was great. So he goes out to do his intro and starts making fun of the song "The Impossible Dream" and that's one of the songs in my show.
Oh, no.
But I'm listening to him. I mean, I had a beautiful arrangement of it, but he was out there going, the last thing you want to do is dream the impossible. So needless to say, the next day we made the agreement that they sent me home with pay. And, because he wanted to give his audience the music they wanted. He knew I was the wrong fit. It wasn't personal. I didn't take it personally. It was hard to go out there after you made fun of one of the songs in my show. But,
I assume he didn't say to you, "You can't sing." He just didn't.
No.
It was just the show itself.
He hadn't heard me. He just had read my bio. And he read the blurb about my show, and he came back and he was just like, he saw my intro. He was like, I don't know why they sent you. You're just not the right singer for this crowd.
Do you ever introduce new songs into your act that nobody's ever heard of before?
Rarely. Isn't that terrible? I'm ashamed to say. I'm about to do my 40th anniversary show with Alex Rybeck. Well, but I am singing one of his original songs with a lyric by Michael Stewart of Hello Dolly fame, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's not that I don't. It's not what you ask me how I fall in love with the music. Those aren't the shows I want to go see. It's a lot of work for an audience to hear an evening of songs they don't know. Just like you have to earn the right for ballads, I feel like I have to earn the right to give something they don't know, which was my credo on cruise ships. It's like, okay, I'll give you 4 songs that you can sing along to. The 5th one's going to be a Cole Porter one that I know you'll love, but you've never heard it. It's
So you're dedicated to songs mostly from the past, which is a fine thing, but you don't then allow yourself to go in and plug in at one point something nobody's ever heard before, literally brand new. That's not your thing.
I have done it for songwriters who've asked me to sing in their evenings of shows. I learn the material. I have a great time doing it. It's, the whole evening is under the umbrella of their work, and I love coming up with a song that I think fits me. And but this is a brand. My dad was in public relations with the Ford Motor Company, and I know that my brand is not known. I need to hook my brand to a brand that is known. And that's just the way I work. That is why virtually all my shows have a theme that is, something that I can use as a marketing tool, something that I think an audience will be drawn to, and hopefully they'll discover me. And I have yet really gotten to the point where it's just a Jeff Harnar show, and it's going to be a potpourri of things, old songs, new songs. I would have a hard time marketing that. I don't think I've arrived to that level.
Well, your audience expects you to sing the songs that you've been singing all along. That's what they're anticipating.
Yes and no. I mean, I give them a lot more credit than that. I just don't know that I can get them to the seats. But that said, I did one show I did was called, because I think you either have to have a name like singing Sammy Kahn music, or you have to have a great title. So I did a show once that was called "Does This Song Make Me Look Fat?" and the gist of it was I wanted to do as close to a stand-up comedy as I could do, only with music. Huh. So it was largely unknown songs, and I did a lot of of new material and specialty material that people didn't know, and I had a ball.
I want to talk about performing for a moment. Do you do things differently now in your live shows than when you started out? And I'm talking about not just songs. I'm talking about the way that you approach things, the way that you sing, the way that you talk to the audience. Do you do things much differently now than when you first started?
I hope so. I have gone to see young singers, and that I realized that's what I was. And my shows were very energetic, and I surrounded myself with a great, I've worked primarily with music director Alex Rybeck and Sarah Louise Lazarus for most of my formative cabaret shows, and they always took good care of me. They were my taste barometers. And Sarah taught the David Craig technique. I don't know if you're familiar with David Craig.
What's the David Craig technique?
So David Craig was Nancy Walker's husband.
Sure.
And he wrote a book called On Performing on Stage, on Singing, on 2 books on singing on stage. And he has a very specific technique for how to personalize songs. And Sarah was one of his star students and advocates. So by studying with her, I was getting the next best thing to being in the room with David Craig. You can there's a whole DVD series where you can watch him work with students. And it all goes down to breaking songs down to, monologuing them first, knowing exactly what what births a song, what moment, dramatically, what the moments are. They're very technical things like how you're standing, narrowing your bass changes, how you focus. Is this song pin spot song to an invisible someone else, or is it a house number to the whole house? There's a craft that Sarah has taught me that has been with me since the very beginning, and I'm very grateful for that. But time has helped me slow down, and there is no substitute for the gift of time. There just isn't. And cabaret singing is one of the art forms where you arguably get better if you're doing it right. if you keep evolving, you have more to bring to the party. There's just more life to channel through.
Is it similar to when a singer knows how to lay back on a note or lay back on an entry rather than hitting it on the nose? Is it that
Yes.
kind of thing?
It is that kind of thing, very much so. Yes, absolutely. Certainly Alex and our taste has evolved in how we arrange things. And when I worked with John Weber on the Sondheim show, I was 58, 50, I don't know, I was 55 or whatever. I just want to speak as me. I also, the show I did, the Sondheim show, Sandra came up with the idea of no patter, no chat in between. That once I say good evening and welcome, to this celebration of Stephen Sondheim, the words and music are Stephen Sondheim, but the story is mine. And from that moment on, and I say that it takes place in New York City. And from that moment on, every word is a Sondheim lyric. Its songs go back to back. It's a song cycle. So if you listen to the album, you are hearing the story that I'm telling. And there was nothing I needed to say between songs because Sondheim says it. Who uses language like that? It's all there. And Sondheim actually kind of spoils you for other songwriters because he gives you so much.
He's a dense writer. There's a lot of great density in his work. There's no question. He's my favorite songwriter of all time for me personally. So I get it. He writes in character, or he's writing things for character so that you can interpret it from a personal perspective.
Yes.
And I think that that's what makes it wonderful. So you also have performed in very large venues, not just Cabaret. And so what is the difference for you in preparing and then actually performing in, say, a Carnegie Hall versus playing in a smaller cabaret space?
Well, the Carnegie Hall moments were brief and glorious. The task is the same. The task is to be a reliable, convincing narrator of the lyric that I'm singing and to try to create the illusion of an intimacy. I just saw Marilyn May at Carnegie Hall and, fantastic. She sang her whole big opening medley. And when it was over, she goes, "Nice room." And she had us like that. And there was no chance. I just saw her last night at 54 Below, and I was sitting literally at her feet. I was the ringside seat under her feet. So I have seen her from the back of Carnegie Hall and from at her feet last night. And the performance is the same.
Interesting.
She is there to make a party. Her credo is the star. You know who the star of my show is? It's the audience. That's what she says. And you totally get that from the get-go. That is her agenda, mission statement, is I'm going to give you a great time.
She feeds off the audience.
Oh, gosh, she does. That's why she's still kicking her feet up at 95. It defies comprehension.
And I assume you feed off the audience too.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. That is another reason why I love the craftsmanship of Sarah Louise Lazarus, Barry Kleinborg, because if an audience isn't giving me what I would hope, if I'm not feeling that energy, I know that I'm in a well-crafted vehicle and I just trust. I trust the next moment. I know exactly what the story. It also serves me when I have vocal trouble. It's which happened recently. I was coming down with COVID and I didn't know it.
Oh,
wow. I didn't know it. I thought I had allergies because I had COVID and COVID laid me flat. But I just thought I was having allergies and in the middle of a performance, my voice. But I just told myself, these stories, what you're saying. Even if you have to speak it, what each thing is about, and it protected me. And that's what can happen when there's an audience that doesn't feel like that. I've had so many audiences that are very quiet, and then at the end they erupt. They're on their feet or whatever. It's so you never know. You can hope that you get a lot back from them.
I actually think that a quiet audience means they're being attentive. I like a quiet audience. If they're rustling and they're moving in their seats, I was once taught a long time ago, it's called the butt test. If they're squirming around in their seats, you have a problem. But if they're quiet, you have them. I think that's
That's in theater. That's absolutely true. In cabaret, there are waiters and there's a low-level din happening and distractions happening.
How do you work your way through those? I mean, you just got used to it, or is there some technique for getting through that?
Again, it just goes back to the preparation. If I really know This is a pin spot number. I know exactly who I'm singing to. Each lyric, I'm looking at their response. I'm looking at what they're wearing. I'm looking at how they're reacting. I can make that, for a large part, go away. Part of my antenna is always aware that someone just dropped a tray, and sometimes that's the fun of it. Is, if somebody's cell phone goes off, oh well, we're all in on that. But in a cabaret room, it's like you can't decorate the elephant if it happens. Everyone heard it. And so to me, those are opportunities, because if I handle it, and like last night, Marilyn handled a couple of things. Just, she said, I hear there's a birthday in the audience. And the woman said, it's my birthday and I brought you flowers. And she said, oh, how great. And she said, thank you. And the guy next to her said, it's my birthday too. And she goes, where are my flowers? It's just like, we all just look at each other. It's like, at any age, but at 95,
that fast. When you're that fast at any age, you're right. It's really great. But when you're 95, that's really amazing.
Yeah. But part of that also is, and Betty Comden and Adolph Green said this to me after they saw the show back in, when I was 30, back in 1989, they said, our wish for you is that you get to perform every night, which we did get to do. We moved that show to the Ballroom, which was in Chelsea. And it was a place where we did 8 shows a week, which, in a cabaret room, which is unheard of now. But it doesn't happen now. But my point is Marilyn is virtually singing every night of the week somewhere. So for her to be quick like that, she's just well oiled.
She's she's really into what she does, and she's been doing it for so long that she just tosses it off naturally.
Yeah.
And that happens. I've taught for a long time. It happens in a classroom as well. Over time, you just relax into what you're doing, and that allows your brain to open up and say things sort of as they're happening, and you can react to things that way. You probably go through that too. Things happen, and you react to them naturally on stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, on a good night.
On a good night.
On a good night. Yes, I do.
So you've also recorded 4 albums.
I've recorded
5?
Alex and I are doing our 5th, and the Sondheim one is my 6th. So the one that's about to come out is my 6th. We did the 1959 Broadway Songbook, Sammy Kahn All the Way, Because of You, 50s Gold, Dancing in the Dark, which is just an eclectic collection. And right now we're recording Cy Coleman. And then John Weber and I released the Sondheim album last June, a year ago. So yeah, I'm up to 6, which is, Ann Hampton Callaway's up to 30, I think. So, oh well.
You've got a little ways to catch up, but you'll work at it.
So for me, it's incredible. It's just.
All right. So what is that? We've now talked about small rooms, large rooms, which you're still trying to achieve the same goal. What is the difference when you get into a studio and now you have this intimate space, really intimate? It's you in a booth basically, or in a small recording studio of some kind, and it's you and a microphone, and you now are trying to project that story through this system, the electronic system. How do you come at that? Is it the same, or are there differences?
Well, it's, it is being under a microscope vocally, which is one of the things I try to really let go of in live performance. Is any intention. To me, the reading of the lyric trumps vocal perfection. So I would rather deliver the meaning of the lyric and crack on it. Well, not crack. I don't want to crack, but just not hit a sweeter note. I can totally tell when I'm watching a singer when they go to a place that they're thinking about their vocal performance versus. But you can't help it when in a recording studio. You want that to sound like it's you on your very best day on the planet, vocally.
Sure.
So. And it's interesting that you asked this right now, because it's not exactly the question you're asking, but I'm working on this album with Bart Miguel, who, as producer, who produced the Sondheim album. He's got 13 Grammy nominations, and he's a genius. Sandra Lee talked to him for 2 minutes and went, he's a genius. He's just a genius. So he is helping me right now in real time to morph the stage cabaret version of our Cy Coleman show into what the listening experience is for the album, and what it means right now, which is happening right now in real time. This interview, I think, will be on right about the time that the album comes out. So listen to it. But there are two songs that he had to tell me he doesn't think fit on this album because they serve a purpose in the show, but they're just not the same listening experience for the listener who's just hearing an album. And it's not that we have a lack of material if we take them away, but it's hard to hear because they're songs that mean something very special.
Well,
to me.
you also spend most of your time in front of a live audience. You're not in the recording studio all the time. You're mostly out on stage. Yeah. So if you've got a live audience in front of you normally, and now you don't have a live audience, are you able to get that feeling in the studio of having people in front of you? How do you do that?
Well, one of the wonderful things that happens in the studio that's different live is in a good gig, I have piano and bass, piano, bass, drum, maybe piano, bass, drum, and a reed player who doubles. So I've got maybe 4 musicians on there. On a cruise ship, I have 7 to 12 musicians, which is great. But on these albums, I've had a band, an orchestra. It's 20 pieces on the Sondheim album. It's 15 pieces on this Cy Coleman thing. So there's a lot of motivation. There's a lot that I'm hearing that is just like, leaping from black and white to Technicolor. As far as I'm getting a lot of, there's a lot to make it magical that helps me. But yeah, it does. There's a craft that I'm not. Only being on my 6th album, I'm not very. And one of those albums was live, so that there's a craft to being in the recording studio.
Does the band in the studio become the audience for you?
No, not really. They're collaborators with me. My audience is really. My director is usually there, the producer, and Alex or John Weber. It's those ears that I'm trying to go into and give a performance. And then I look to them to see if, we got it or whatever, or we can auto pitch correct one note there, but we shouldn't touch this take because this has a feeling that, there are other people listening who I trust. Which has been the story of my career, is surround yourself with people that you really trust.
Well, that's the truth for most motion picture and television directing, is the director is the audience, and that's what the actors are working against. So it's sort of a similar thing what you're talking about, where you don't have an actual paid audience in front of you. The director and maybe the producer and whoever else is there, they become the feedback for you.
Yes.
And I've got to assume that that's important to you because you're so used to it. You're used to having that immediate feedback.
Yes. I can give you a specific example. Tomorrow I'm going for an overdub day. And we were making our list of things we want to fix on the Cy Coleman album. And I mentioned the beginning of one song. And he said, I wouldn't touch that. He said, I wouldn't touch that. And I'm like, okay, I hear. I was like, do I want to sing it straight tone? Do I want to have vibrato on that? Should I just speak the line? I don't think it. And he's like, I wouldn't touch that. Like, okay. He said, I'm happy to, if you want to, we can do it to your heart's content. But so I am going to defer to his 13 Grammy nominations and just say, okay, you know more about this than I do.
I think most artists are not good judges of themselves.
No.
Which is why it's a miracle sometimes when you see a movie directed by someone who's starring in it as well. That's miraculous.
That is miraculous. Has there ever been a Broadway show directed by that? I mean, maybe a review, but I mean a book show directed by someone who's on the stage.
I don't know. The closest I think you can get to it would be Lin-Manuel Miranda. Sure.
Yeah.
Because he didn't direct it. He writes it and he's in it.
Yeah.
That's already pretty heady stuff right there.
Yeah.
You also, I promised we'd talk about directing. You've been directing for a little while now as well. You direct other cabaret acts, right?
Correct. Yes.
And so what is it that fulfills you about directing?
Well, ultimately, the Hammerstein lyric, if you become a teacher by your pupils, you'll be taught. I mean, it forces me I'm a big believer I'm in 12-step recovery. And we sponsor other people who are in 12-step recovery. And sponsoring means you're guiding them through the choices that you have made that are working for you. And that's how I approach directing. I am not really directing them and telling them what to do. I am sponsoring them to get the best possible version of themselves on the stage, to get the light channeling through with the fewest obstructions. And I can't suggest tool or a direction unless I'm actively doing it myself. I can't say, you need to do that. I don't do it, but you better do it. I say, this is what works for me. This is how you can take this or leave it, but this is how I do it. And having to verbalize it like that, then the next time I go on stage, I'm like, am I really, if one of my students was out there, am I really doing what I said that I do? Have I really done all this homework? Have I monologued this song? Do I know exactly what happened the moment before I sing? Do I know where the curtain goes up in this song? Do I know, am I staying in the moment even after the music has stopped till the last possible? It's fantastic in that way. And I work with a range of artists, from some who are doing their very first show to people like Tova Feldshuh and Rita Gardner, who are seismic talents. So, any day I spend with Tova Feldshuh is a masterclass for me, even though she's hiring me as a director. And with Tova, she says I'm one of the 5 best directors she's ever worked with. I don't know, maybe she says that to all of them, but she says, because I create a safe space and I don't tell her what to do, I may make a suggestion. What I love about what I learned from Tova is when I make a suggestion that she doesn't like, she says, I don't know that I agree with that, but I'm going to give it to you 100% so you can see if you like it. And then she'll give me what I suggested. And I'm like, oh, you're right. That's really bad. I'm not like that in rehearsal. It's very hard for me to say, I don't like that, but I'll give it to you 100% so we can decide if that's the right choice. I have to work on not being defensive. I have to work on, there's fear and whatever, but Tova's just like, I want notes. Let's do it again. Aren't we lucky? We're in the play box. We get to the sandbox. We get to, all she wants is notes. Even if it's closing night, she wants notes.
That's amazing. There are plenty of performers, both as singers and actors and so on, musicians as well, who don't want notes. They just want to do their thing. And so I think it's wonderful when somebody wants notes. I think notes are really valid.
Oh, she loves it. She loves it. She's like, let's do that moment again. Let's, right after we're done, let's do it again so I can lock it in. Let's do it.
Are you saying you don't take notes as well as she does?
I have to sit there. I've never said this in an interview before, but I always sit there. My internal monologue is, don't be defensive. This person has my best interest at heart. It's not about defending. It's about listening. Hear it, listen.
Is it because the notes hurt?
It's because I have made a choice and I have committed to it 100%. So sometimes it's hard for me to hear it in another way. And sometimes it's embarrassing to think, oh God, did I do something embarrassing? I mean, you have to go out there, and whatever choice you're making in a performance is yours. You have made it. I mean, and I tell that to people that I'm working with. Ultimately, the choice on stage is yours. And I'm just showing you different choices you could make.
Do you think directing is making you a stronger singer and performer?
There is no question. Absolutely.
So the students are teaching the teacher then?
Oh, without question. Without question. And they're making me treasure my collaborations. It's one of the things I love about cabaret performing is we take the agency away from the audition panel. We are saying, I want to work with you as my music director. I want to work with you as my director. And when that constellation is right, which with Sarah and Alex, and it's been that way with John Weber and Sandra Lee and me, and I've had the gift of 98% of those constellations being, I'm in my happy place. It goes right back to when I'm 9 years old. I'm doing what I love to do with people that I love to do. It behooves me to take the notes. And yes, I'm learning all the time. And I think that's why someone like Marilyn May, well, she doesn't have anyone giving her notes, I'm sure, but it's why she's forever young. I mean, have you noticed how long Julie Wilson, we were creating shows. She and I did a brand new show from the ground up together when she was 79. I don't know that I'll be able to.
I don't think there's any way that anybody can perform for as long as some of these folks do if they don't absolutely love what they're doing.
Sylvia Sims had one lung, was blind in one eye, was overweight and was diabetic. And yet she had to sit in a chair for her shows, but you get her on stage and she's 20 again. She's just rocking, taking a chance on love. And she, hooray for Hollywood. You may be Donald. It's just like the years just melted away. So I think it is a way to stay forever young.
When you're having maybe a not great day, but you got to go to perform, does that change everything when you get on stage?
Yes. It does. The only thing that can really sap the joy is if I have a vocal, any kind of illness, if there's something that compromises my vocal strength or my energy. That's the only thing that's very hard to not feel apologetic about or not. It's really interesting. That Sondheim thing where I was getting COVID and didn't know it. That show has no pattern. So there was no moment where I could say anything about, I think I just had to take that ride. Thank God, because I know I would have said, oh, I'm really sorry. I don't know what's happening. Maybe, I'm going to speak a little, or, I would have said something, but it forced me to stay in the moment.
You're being a typically great trooper and you're just working your way through it.
Yes, that is what happened.
I think
Noah Coward wrote the song, Why Must the Show Go On? Brave trooper doopers have bored us for years.
Well, and truer words have never been said. That's true. That's what makes the live theater so special, is that you're getting a unique performance every single night. And whether it's singers or actors or whatever, you're getting that live performance one and only one time. It's not repeated ever. And that's a really cool thing. So the actors have to do whatever they're doing to get through it, just like you do. You're getting COVID. You don't know you're getting COVID, but something's not right, and you work your way through it. I've been having absolutely the most wonderful and insightful conversation with Jeff Harnar for the last hour, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit. And I'm just wondering, you've clearly been doing this for a while, and you've met tons of people in the business, and you've had lots of experiences. And I'm wondering, do you have an oddball, weird, quirky, offbeat, or just plain funny story you can share with us?
Well, there are so many things that have gone wrong.
Do tell.
I'm going to tell one, and I'm not going to name the city, but Alex and I were in a city where we needed to hire sidemen, and we were told that these twins, they're very renowned twins in the jazz world, that we should have one of them play. So we had him come, and the rehearsal, you get one. We just had the day of the show to rehearse him, and it was quite clear he was a jazzer and didn't read charts. And Alex's charts are orchestrated. They're really very specific, and they're not written for, so we worked to try and get this. And then when the show came, he was even worse. It was so bad. And during the intermission, Alex came up to me and said, I think they switched twins on us. I think we have a different one for them, the one we had at rehearsal. So that was it. Anyway, that kind of stuff is I love. It keeps it fresh.
Well, again, you're taking what you get, right? You're playing it as it lays.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And one that Alex loves to rib me about is the first time we did the 1959 Broadway Songbook in New York, which was a celebration of the 21 musicals you could have heard in New York in 1959. No revivals, all new shows. And Dolores Gray was in the audience, and one of her shows was Destry Rides Again in 1959. And nobody confirmed that Joan Rivers was at my feet. She was just like this. So I was already freaking out, because I was at the Algonquin Hotel in the legendary Oak Room, and it was a very big deal. And all the press was there on the opening night. So it was and Sylvia Sims was there. As I walked to the stage, she goes, Jeff, look where they seated me. Because she didn't like her seat. So anyway, dead center is this woman who I think it's Dolores Gray, but I'm thinking it can't be because she looks so young and beautiful. So Alex and I finished one of our big medleys, and she goes, "Hey!" And I said, what? And she goes, "Hey!" And I said, what? Now the room is quiet. And she goes, brilliant. So I made her shout brilliant three times is what they heard. Brilliant. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. And, anyway, he loves to tease me. That I made her say it 3 times. And after the show, the guy who was sitting next to her came up to me and said, when you started the song, I Say Hello, which was her big number from Destry Rides Again, she grabbed my knee. It's my song. It just, I've had so many songwriters and stars like that, that mean something to me from my childhood. It's incredible. That's one of the things I've loved about I may have missed the golden age of cabaret, but I was at least here for Jerry Herman and Burton Lane and Comden and Green and Julie Stein and, and Stephen Sondheim. I at least had that wonderful.
Well, that's a great good fortune to do what you love and to keep doing it for so much time for so many great people. All right. So last question for you today, Jeff. What is the best piece of advice that you like to give those who ask you what should they do when they're starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to, mature and get to that next level?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that goes back to me being in a 12-step program, which is we talk about how can we be of service. And until I got sober, it never occurred to me that being of service means giving without expecting anything in return. So the art of performing, it never occurred to me that I am in service to an audience. I'm in service to the songwriters that I'm singing. I'm in service to a venue. I want to leave a small footprint there. I am in it always was about me and my own ambition. And that's one of the things that has changed for me in the last 12 years is this thought that how am I taking care of these other people, other musicians that I work with, whatever. So that's one thing I would say is I wish I could go back and tell my younger self the meaning of real gratitude and the meaning of giving back without framing what I do as something that I'm bringing to rather than getting from. And then the other thing, which is to choose the best collaborators. It's one thing when you're in school and you get thrust. I certainly had dance teachers that ruined dance for me. I had acting teachers that ruined acting for me because they were the teachers that the curriculum said I study with. But once I was on my own, I had the agency to pick people like Sarah Louise Lazarus, Alex Rybeck, John Weber, all the ones that I've mentioned. And how fabulous. So surround yourself with people whose work you trust.
Now, I think that's tremendous advice because it can't be much fun if you're working with people who you don't trust.
Well, I said there's like 2% of my experience has been with people who really challenge the very people they've hired to take care of them. And I just find that baffling. It's like, we're not in it for the money. I'm not in it for the money because I live a very small life in my little studio apartment in New York City that has a rent controlled, rent, but I'm in it for the joy. And if it's not joyful, and that doesn't mean that it's always happy, but if problem solving can maybe not be happy, but it's joyful. So if I'm not surrounded by people who bring me joy and are part of the solution, not part of the problem, I don't want to pick people and make them into an antagonist. So it's, but these choices are ours to make. There are more choices that we can make than just walking in and who do we sing 16 bars for and do they pick us in casting. We get to make larger choices that have to do with the quality of our journey. And I've got very lucky that 40 years ago, I picked Alex Rybeck as my very first music director, and we're still together. He's my Wally Harper. That was the dream, was to find someone who did what Wally Harper did for Barbara Cook.
And it's much to your good fortune and to your audience's good fortune, that's for sure.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Jeff Harnar, this has been a really terrific hour on StoryBeat, and I can't thank you enough for spending time with us and giving us all this wisdom and insight into how you do what you do. So I thank you greatly.
It's been a great conversation. You certainly know how to ask the right questions.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.